Bandido, Outriders, and Burgle Brothers 2, The Casino Capers. This is Staying In.
It's hot.
Is it?
And it is really quite warm.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. I've got to the point now where I've had to turn the radiators off.
Hang on. I'm just going to get my phone. We're going to do a quick weather
Well,
check.
I mean, Pete does live closer to the equator than us.
That is true. So 15 degrees today where I am. 15 degrees.
Oh,
Balmy.
And I'm going to type in Pete's postcode because I've got it. It's always on hand.
just memorised.
15. So yeah, 15 degrees. I mean,
That's Celsius, of course.
yeah. I mean, it has been hotter.
What in the past? Yes, yeah. I mean, it has been hotter, but it is 15 degrees. It's warm. I'm sat here and I am absolutely sweating buckets.
It's 15 degrees.
Yeah, but it's the way that it's sort of turned on a dime. It was nice and chilly previously. It's like, you know, when I like to think of myself sometimes as you know how, like, in the 18th century people used to think that they were made of glass and they'd think that they would shatter.
No, did they think that?
Yeah.
Did they?
Yeah, there's
Not
this,
literally,
there was-
though, Pete.
Yeah. No, they literally thought they were glass. Sam, Google this.
Did people think they were made of glass? Okay.
In the
That's
18th
what
century.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Might have screwed that bit up. But they definitely did think they were made of glass. And there's history of people thinking they're other amazing materials that they've not seen before. And the reason that they thought all of that is because they'd never really kind of experienced these materials. So there's a very famous, I think it was a French king, thought that he was made of glass and was...
Charles VI.
There we go. And was deathly terrified that anybody that would touch him would literally shatter him. And what I'm saying is, maybe I've got a little bit of that, right? Because if you think about it, when you heat up a glass really, really quickly, you go from cold to hot, it cracks. Maybe I've got like a version of that.
I do think Unbreakable would be a very different film if you had taken on the role that Samuel L. Jackson portrayed.
Right. What happens in Unbreakable?
Oh, Well, what do you think happens in the film Unbreakable, starring Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis?
Bruce Willis is in it.
Yeah.
It's only
Ooh,
21 years old, Pete, so it
Okay.
kind of makes sense you've not come across it.
And they made a sequel all those years later called, was it Glass, I think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's technically part of a trilogy.
Yes, with what the hell was the
James McAvoy.
Yes, in that film where he has like
Split.
Yes, Split. That's the one.
So M. Night Shyamalan was
Yep.
the director. That might be a clue. That might help you, might not help you.
Oh, okay, yeah.
There's a twist.
Well, the twist will be he thinks he's unbreakable, but he is. I assume that he's pretty on the nose about stuff. So maybe it's that.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
I think you'd actually enjoy it as a film.
I mean, I
'cause
like
it's-
those two actors.
It's
I think
a
they're-
comic book movie.
What, like? So what? Like Samuel L. Jackson is like.
He plays a comic book. He plays a comic book collector who
Oh,
believes that these modern day comics are a continuation of our love with mythology. That actually these kinds of heroes that we, idolise, whether they be the ancient Greeks or other cultures' mythos, this is just a modern day variant of that, really. And he
Probably
believes
right.
that these kinds of figures do walk among us, and he's fascinated by Bruce Willis's character, who he believes is one of those people.
Oh right. Okay.
Because he never gets ill. Never had a cold. Never taken a day off work.
How did he find this out?
He survived a train crash at the
That's
beginning
why.
of the
Yeah,
film.
that was the more important bit.
Yeah, that was what clinched it, I would say.
Show me your attendance records. Hang on a second.
Yeah, he had an Excel spreadsheet and he was kind of running his finger across every column. No. Oh, hello.
Do you know what, Chris? I'm very, very excited to hear from you today because, first of all, I like to hear your voice, and second of all, I saw on WhatsApp a little while ago that you'd received a Kickstarter.
Yes, I had,
and a Kickstarter you've been waiting for a while.
Yeah, this one's got quite a long tail. I backed this successfully. I think it was May 2019. Like, it's one of those beautiful kinds of Kickstarters which has just grown and grown, and this is Burgle Brothers 2, the Casino Capers. So way back, listener, episode 1 of the pod, I talked about Burgle Brothers, which is probably one of my favourite board games. An indie game from Tim Fowers. This one's from Tim Fowers and Jeff Krause, with art still by Ryan Goldsberry, who's done a number of art for Fowers on a number of games we've actually spoken about on this pod. It's basically the same as it was in the first Burgle Brothers. It's a heist game. And when I typed that into Google, I wanted a board game. I wanted it to be heist connected. The universe gifted me Burgle Brothers, and I've never looked back since, really. What is crucial to me, and my main worry was that when you buy the sequel to a game that you love, you know, does that make the original surplus to requirements now? Actually, do I need that anymore in my life? Yeah. It's the same with any sequel to any kind of game, whether it be video or board, really, to some degree. And I'm happy to say that, yes, you can own both these games. Mark, I don't know if you've played much board games or if you've heard of Burgle Brothers at all.
I dabble with board games. I have a collection behind me on this Zoom call, but no, Burgle Brothers is not one I'm familiar with.
Honestly, like, do you like co-op games?
I do, yeah.
I honestly think you'd like this, but you essentially play like a team of crooks, and in the first Burgle Brothers you were robbing a bank, a free-floor bank. Here you're robbing a casino, so there's already this kind of real strong Ocean's 11, 12 and 13 vibes. Did it go up to 30? Did it go past 13? I can't remember. I never saw them. Yeah, there was
8 as well, so it was 11, 12, 13 and an 8.
So you're a team of criminals and you've got to work together to rob a casino. The casino is made up of rooms that are tiles that you shuffle out randomly and put them face down, and you have them in a grid of 2 floors, and you've got these lovely little wooden sticks that delineate rooms, and there's a wonderful little random room generator online that they've created where you can just have different rooms every time, and you've got to sneak in, flipping tiles to find the relevant safe on the second floor, to then crack that code and then leave, essentially. And as you're moving around, you've got a finite number of actions. You've got special abilities of your characters. As you're moving around, you're trying, some of the tiles you might move into will be very helpful, like the revolving door, which will allow you to move diagonally through walls, which is great. Other tiles you may flip might be like the slot machine, which are bad because they will cause you to create a commotion. And commotions are pretty bad. They're the equivalent of what the alarm tiles were in Burgle Brothers, the first one, where if you create a commotion, the enemy bouncer on your floor will head towards that commotion. So it's almost like a little bit like those kind of stealth video games where you make a sound and you've attracted the attention of a guard and they're moving towards you and you have to kind of creatively avoid their attention. Mm-hmm. And these bouncers move at the end of everyone's go. So you have these patrol cards which tell you where they're going to move to next. So you've got a little bit of warning, but still there's this interesting puzzle of trying to kind of maneuver through these floors without being seen by these bouncers. And if a bouncer moves into a tile that you're in or vice versa, you take 2 heat, and there's these little heat cubes. You take 6 heat cubes, we all lose the game. And what I really loved about Burgle Brothers, which this one really builds on even more so, is the conversations around the table. It's very difficult, even though it could be possible, to quarterback in Burgle Brothers, because actually you're not necessarily just thinking about yourself. They've thought very carefully about giving each player an ability that will help other people around the table. So you have 4 actions, but you also have an extra action where you can use one of your specialist skills on any one person's go. So you always feel useful throughout this game, and that's a really nice feeling to have, where you can all get around saying, well, hang on, no, you can go there. Oh, hang on, no, the bouncer's going to see you. Well, hang on, I will create a distraction here, which will bring the bouncer over here, and then you can make your getaway. And there's something really lovely about that still continues to kind of appeal. The art by Goldsberry is just stunning. It feels like those kind of 60s kind of Hanna-Barbera cartoons, that kind of aesthetic. So it's slightly infantilizing and slightly nostalgic, but also feels very much part of that kind of 60s-esque kind of the original Ocean's film era, I suppose, really, with the Rat Pack in it and stuff like that. And yeah, there's a lot to love about it still. One thing that's great that isn't in the original is the surprise endings, where you have like this envelope of finale cards and you just draw one at random, and you can't just leave the game. You'll have to do something before you leave. And what I love is I've not even looked at them. I've played 2 games of this, and the endings were extraordinary. One ending we opened the safe. There was nothing in it. So to get our revenge, we had to basically each go around and steal 3 sections of the wall to demolish the bank, all without being caught by these bouncers. So we're running around here doing that. In one of the endings, we all had to plant evidence on one of the bouncers. But to do that, we all had to get 6 heat at the same time in one round. So we've gone from avoiding the bouncers to trying to almost trap them. And it's just great, honestly.
It is impressive, and I was definitely sceptical because Burgle Brothers is quite a pretty tight sort of cooperative game. Go in, rob a bank or rob somewhere, and that's it. Like there's a safe on each level, I think, in Burgle Brothers.
Yeah, the first one, yeah.
But strangely, what Burgle Brothers 2 shows me is that actually the first game actually wasn't that thematic. Like, I think what actually Burgle Brothers 2 does, it improves upon the first one, is actually picks exactly the right setting for this kind of game and these kind of mechanics. Because whereas in the first game, you know, like tripping alarms and walking into security booths, here you're on a casino floor, and that is remarkably more interesting and more diverse than a sort of corporate bank.
Sure.
And you know, as Chris was saying, instead of tripping the alarm, you just got distracted and started pulling a one-armed bandit at a slot machine. Or there are times when you'll just walk across a craps table and you'll start like throwing dice, and suddenly the bouncers start getting interested about what's going on this, like over on this table here, and you'll bump into drunk people who affect how you can move. You'll bump into, you know, members of the FBI who are just like walking around, and they'll affect how you actually play. Those little like hiccups that happen in all the Ocean's films, like all those little like details and all those little things, there's unpredictable parts of it which you can make the experience feel human but also add the right amount of tension to it, wasn't really there in the first game. However, here it genuinely feels like the plan is going to crumble at any second. Like the casino is just too full of different things that are out of your control, and that makes for just a better game and a more thematic experience of like planning a heist. And what Chris was saying about like the conversations around, I think the conversations around the table in Burgle Brothers 2 were just a lot more interesting, because it's just like, oh, I'm just gonna win some money on this on this slot machine before and to unlock the safe, you have to first find a mole, and the mole will give you the codes to unlock the safe, and you have to find the manager's office, and that's where, you know, some of the codes are kept. So rather than in the first game, you just found the safe and rolled some dice and maybe you unlocked it, here you can really see, you know, that conversation of, you know, of a plan coming together and how all these bits fit into an actual heist, which has an arc, which has a story arc like it does in the Ocean's films. And that just makes it a genuinely better like board gaming experience.
It definitely sounds more flavorful. Like I wonder. So one of the things that I absolutely loved about the original was how much of we talked about this kind of thing before, but board games that kind of respect your shelf space. Yeah. I have a great deal of counter respect for those games. So the first game was really quite condensed, you know, really small, and I think maybe actually that might have made it suffer a little bit at retail.
To a fault,
because, yeah, right. And like, I think it's great, and I love that stuff, but I understand why board game companies put things in massive boxes. What is the second one like? Is it same sort of size? Is it as well in the industrial design on the first one is just amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got legs, literally. Like it comes with a set of legs. So because it takes place over 2 floors, Tim Fowers, being the genius he is, and I know about this from Kickstarter updates through the simulations they were doing online through like computer-aided design and things, you can actually like tip the box up, and you come to these 4 legs which you slot in, you flip it upside down, and you can put the second floor above the ground floor. I've not played with it like that, just because I think on the table I'd find it a little bit too fiddly in terms of eye line, but just the gumption to say, yeah, let's just do that, because you can buy a Burgle Brothers tower which is already like that, but he thought, no, actually I'm going to give the players that in the box already. If they want to do that, they can. If they don't want to, that's absolutely fine. And it's also got a campaign mode that you can also do. It's just extraordinary. I mean, what I love about Fowers games in general, and we've spoken about this at length, is it just gives and gives and gives, really. What this game was when I backed it on Kickstarter, which was already pretty good and really promising, and it did so well immediately, has grown so much because he keeps saying, yeah, actually, maybe 3 endings isn't enough. We'll add some more in. And he'll, do people want to suggest some endings? Oh, great, yeah, that's brilliant. Let's put some in there. And it just kept growing. Rather than kind of just saying, yeah, I'm sorry, it's delayed because of COVID, he's actually, in some respects, used those delays, which are unfortunate, but he's used them to make this the best it could possibly be. And it really does feel like that, which is just wonderful, really.
I'm thinking of us starting a new category for Board Game Awards, for Just Game Awards, for anything we talk about awards on this one. Because we've got breakfast games, we've got games to read to, what is it, games you've got to have a cup of tea to. And I'm thinking of starting a new one called Bag Games, or games you'll put in a bag.
Games you'll... No, Sam. Games you'll put in a bag.
Yeah, games you'll put in a bag.
What does that
like
even
a really small,
mean?
like a small bag, a really small bag.
Yeah, like a small bag. So basically, like you're going away somewhere,
Yeah.
and you just got a backpack with you,
Okay.
or like someone did on My Wife's Hen Do, went to Barcelona for a weekend with just a bum bag.
What?
Incredible. Just a toothbrush and a...
I mean, I saw the suitcase
Toothbrush and a
Pete
copy
brought when
of
he
Coup.
stayed at yours for a weekend some years ago, Sam. It was massive.
Massive. All of the essentials. What?
But I'm talking about, like, you're going away somewhere, or you're going to work, you got your backpack on, and you just feel like just chucking a game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something like compact and small.
So what's the difference between this and a travel game?
Well, travel games are condensed versions of bigger games.
Yeah,
aren't they?
I'm thinking in my mind with what you're describing, something like Coup is
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
condensed, simple, easy, and
Love
there isn't
letter.
a bigger version of that. Though there should be.
Yeah.
That'd be amazing.
Sushi Go.
Sushi Go.
Great
Absolutely, yeah.
Button Shy, which is a company in America, I think, that make games where they're all strictly 18 cards. So all the games are made up of just 18 cards, and they all come in these little wallets. So these like Dennis the Menace Club-esque wallets, or a travel card if you're boring. And basically, like, there are these wonderful games like Sprawlopolis, which I've got, and they're just like perfect games, just like chuck into a bag. And when you're at work and your lunch break, or you're going to meet friends, they're just really easy to like pull out and play. It's a legitimate award that we should be handing out.
Yeah, we just need to work on the title, I think. But yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
bag
yeah.
games.
Bag
Because I've-
games.
Because I've been playing Bandido by Helvetic, and they're probably a company that make all their games are probably like bag games. Like we've talking about Omerta in the past, and Chris got me Compromat as part of a Secret Santa, and they're all like tiny boxes, but of genuinely really interesting like party games. In Omerta's case, a really tense and exciting 2-player game in the case of Compromat. And Bandido is one of my new favourite single-player games, and it's become my like go-to game when I'm going to work. Is that, you know, I'll just throw it into my rucksack, and then I thought, wouldn't be interested if we rewarded games of how great they are just to chuck in a bag. And Bandido is just super simple, and you've probably seen it in a shop somewhere for incredibly cheap, probably like less than 15 quid. And it's almost like a reverse Labyrinth, where you're not looking for the center. Essentially, what you're trying to do is block off all the possible exits. So the story of the game is there's this little Bandido who sits in their little cell at the center of the table, and you draw 3 cards, and on each of those cards will depict several different like routes, like tunnels dug through the dirt. And the idea is the Bandido is like moving their way through these tunnels, winding through like underground, trying to find a way out. And on your turn, you've got to place a card down, and that's extending not only different routes of escape for the bandit, but it's also basically opening out the basically the floor space, the footprint of this game at the same time. And what you're trying to do is create loops so that tunnels will come back on themselves, essentially close themselves. So you imagine like the bandit's going through and he goes, oh, there's a tunnel, and I'll come back on myself. Or there are cards that have got basically this little image of a hand holding a torch, which is essentially a way of like closing off and like stopping a tunnel dead. That's like a cop, like holding a torch down a tunnel and waiting for the bandit to appear. And that's the game. And it's a really nice, meditative, gentle experience that slowly gets out of hand extremely very, very quickly. I made the mistake of playing this game quite a few times on the same table that my wife was doing a jigsaw on. And every single time I played it, I ended up with cards balanced right on the edge of the table, because the game creates a really nice balance where you always think you're just about to catch him. You're just about to close off the last little. All you need is that one card to come up, and then all hell will break loose. And then suddenly, like, the cards are just sprawling all across the table. You're moving coasters, you're moving drinks, you're moving plates, and we're gonna have to extend this baby out because we've not got enough room to put all these cards down. And for a little game that fits in, that I just chuck in my bag, I've had a really good time with it. And like, especially a game that I can just play. You can play with other people, but I don't know. I just don't. I personally wouldn't see the appeal. It's been a great little solo.
It looks a little bit like a puzzle game.
It is, and it's kind of like a puzzle in reverse. It's kind of, as I said, it's not necessarily like one of those children's mats you get in McDonald's where you just like find the cheese at the centre of a maze or whatever.
Yeah.
You're trying to stop the cheese escaping the maze whilst also building the maze at the same time. And it's one of these puzzle games where halfway through you convince yourself that they can't have possibly have thought of everything. They can't have possibly have thought of how to close all of these loops off. And then suddenly you'll draw the card which lets you make that possibility. And also it's one of those games that feels like it's impossible until you do it, which I always think is a really good mark of a good solitaire experience. Solitaire being probably the most prime, example of that, is like solitaire feels impossible until the moment that you do it, and then it's like, well, that was, fantastic. So yeah, so throw it in your bag as a game the title needs some work, doesn't it?
Yeah, we'll workshop that. Yeah.
Back in the pack in the pack games.
Yeah, let's
put that back in the pack.
No, let's
bum bag games, fanny pack games.
Let's definitely not go down that route.
I am right in believing and feeling that chocolate bars have shrunk in size over the last 20-odd years. I feel like they have.
Depends which bar.
Yes, it's part of maybe now that Britain has left the EU, we don't have to. Where they can grow again.
Every cloud.
we might be losing universal healthcare, but
and potentially human rights. But listen,
you know what? Our chocolate bars, they will get big again.
So it's basically as part of like maybe it was a European directive. I'm going to say it is now because Brexit will improve things. Basically, companies either had to limit the amount of sugar that was available in chocolate bars. Okay. So the first thing that happened was that most chocolate manufacturers banned king-size variants of their chocolates.
A dark day.
And we'll come back to that. And the other thing they did is they basically, rather than finding a sugar substitute, which is expensive, takes a lot of research, just shrunk the bars. So then they met the criteria for the government legislation. But the replacement for the king size was, as you now see, is the duos.
Yeah.
So the idea of it's not king size, so it's not an inordinate amount of chocolate. It's a lot of chocolate, but it's split up into nice, small, bite-sized things, with the idea being that if you're having a healthy, balanced diet, you'll have one half of the duo, and then maybe tomorrow you'll have the other half of the duo.
No person on this earth has ever had a
I
duo
don't think that's,
over 2 days.
That's never happened, does it? On the bottle of fizzy pop that I bought the other day, it was like contains 2 servings. I was like, it doesn't. like no one is doing that.
They recently had a thing over here in Ireland about the bread from Subway, where they said that you legally cannot classify this as bread because it contains too much sugar. That happened here.
Wow. That was the same, wasn't it, with the McDonald's burgers? That's why they used to have that's why the gherkins there. Otherwise, they would be classed as confectionery.
I did not know that.
What?
No, Chris, that's
No,
absolute
that can't be
boulder
real,
dash.
Chris.
That was a rumour that was went around at school, so it's got to be repeated.
yeah, well,
I'm
exactly,
sure it
so
is,
it's not
but
true,
Chris,
is
I
it?
haven't based how I live my life on school child rumours for many years. Yeah, but that's not the same as slap a gherkin on and now you can call it a burger. Oh my god, he's right, mate. He's right. He's yeah. Oh, actually, hold on a second. Breaking news.
Correction.
From McDonald's.com.
Oh,
Okay, good.
All right.
Well,
legitimate
credible
source.
source.
Yep.
Are gherkins added to a Big Mac to offset the sugar content and avoid it being called a dessert? And the answer is no, this is not true. Gherkins are used simply to add to the flavour of the burger. So, because...
See, well, the problem here is, like, someone at McDonald's headquarters played Theme Park back in the day, and on the Burger Shack, they just went too far on the max for, like, the salt and the sugar, and here we are.
You can imagine them at the PC, can't you? Just like, just like a burger in their mouth, and then, like, it just drops, and they're just shocked. Like, Barry, I've put more salt in the fries! So hold on. So Subway makes bread that isn't bread.
Apparently so. Or here in Ireland, like here, it's not called bread, but everywhere else is still bread.
What's it called?
I don't know. Subway has been closed. Well, everywhere's closed, so I haven't gone to check for myself.
I wonder if when you go back, you know how sometimes you go into a pub and you say, "I'll have a Coke, please,"
Yeah.
and they say, "Pepsi, all right." I wonder if now when they say, "And what kind of whatever it is that they refer to, and which one of these would you like?" You go, "Oh, I'll have the Italian bread," and they go, "Is Italian sugar loaf all
It's sweet
right?"
dough, okay?
Sweet
Yeah.
dough, right?
Like at the pub when you ask for a Coke and they say, "Oh, it's Pepsi." Is that okay?
Pete just
I
literally
literally just said
I'm
that.
sorry.
Chris. Did you just
Literally
Sorry.
just
Did you
said
just
that.
did you just
I literally just had a mental absence. That was really weird.
that was
I mean, I can't even blame it on lag because there wasn't any. It was crystal clear.
I think you heard it, but you didn't register it, and it just kind of floated
Yeah.
around for a few seconds.
Now it's been confirmed that Chris's internal monologue is Pete's voice.
Chris, I just thought that was you thinking about bread.
No, Zoom fatigue. Do you know what I was thinking about? Do you know actually what I was thinking about? And I do apologise, Pete. I was thinking about, look, as Mark says, bread isn't bread. I'm thinking, well, okay, can you imagine if bread disappeared and we had to replace it for the outer layer of the sandwich? What would that be?
What would it be?
No wonder you blacked out.
I did. I literally. I mean, the calculations just rendered me so inert that I had to just put all my processing power on that.
It's just you know that meme from Always Sunny in Philadelphia where he's like at the board and he's working it out. That's just you, but trying to figure
what
out
happened if
what a
bread
bread substitute
disappeared?
for a sandwich would be.
I got to like egg, like an omelette, wrapping it.
I have to be honest. I got to be honest. This is the kind of conversation you'd expect 2 17-year-olds in college, while incredibly high, would be having.
Chris, what? So we've got to think about what. So is a corn tortilla is that bread? Does it have to be something that's risen with yeast?
Like discount anything that's got bread in the title. Yeah.
So
any
anything
bread.
that's like flour mixed with water.
Yeah.
Gone. So your
Gone.
next one is egg.
Yeah.
Why? Why do you think? What is it about egg that makes it a natural substitute for bread?
Bread disappeared.
Chris, what is it? I want an explanation because I can't live a life where you think egg is basically bread.
Also, can I just state here, Chris's thought pattern is like food dominates his life so much that he's got to always consider the possibility of, but what if that disappeared?
Yeah. It's like when you're directing a play. You know, every actor has to have an understudy.
The understudy to bread is not egg, Chris.
But yeah, I downloaded and played Outriders because I didn't know what Outriders was, and I have Xbox Game Pass, which means I could find out without paying for it.
So I just want to delve into that a little bit, because I believe, Sam, you were talking about Outriders at one point. Like, I seem to remember, and I seem to remember thinking, what is Outriders?
Yeah.
Where has this suddenly
as
come
I was
from?
downloading it, I was thinking, what is Outriders?
A bit like that, and Valheim. Like Valheim and Outriders have been like the two things where I've the only times I've now started to feel like, I'm getting out of touch.
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea that these two
This
these
is
two
what
games
cinema
came
must be
out.
like for Pete.
But Outriders was just like, we're always on the lookout for like our next cooperative game. So any sort of game that says, this you jump on with your mates, and Outriders was saying all the right things in terms of like, you can jump on with your mates, and like it has a really flexible difficulty leveling system. So, if you're finding things too tough, you can boot up or boot down the level if you just want to enjoy the story. And it's not a live service game. You just go in and enjoy the numbers falling off things. So like that was the most amount of research I did, and then I started doing a little bit more research, and I was like, oh god, Outriders, maybe not.
Yeah. So I went in. I've played about 4 or 5 hours of it. Well, I think I actually was closer to 7 hours, because 2 of those hours was waiting for the game to actually load up because of the the nature of the servers being what they have been. I'm not sure if they're any better now. What I didn't realise is that Outriders actually was a game that came out 12 years ago, just no one knew, because it is a very dated gameplay, has a very dated gameplay style, in this kind of hybrid of Gears of War and Borderlands, the two kind of closest comparisons that I'd make. And over on Link to the Cast, we have, speaking of kind of game categories, we have our Ham Sandwich, Peter Willington, Keen, okayest game of the year. That kind of 6 out of 10 that just can't be bad, isn't good. It's just sits somewhere right in the middle.
Just super okay.
Super okay. Your Mad Max, Vin Diesel's Wheelman, because I had to bring it up at some point on this.
Yeah. It goes between 10 and 3 out of 10 very quickly.
Yeah. But Outriders is actually, it's a packet of crisps kind of game, in that it has absolutely no nutritional value. It has no kind of real redeeming qualities, but you just keep munching away and you just can't stop. And before you've realised it, the can of Pringles has been eaten. And you could easily get sucked into the gameplay loop that Outriders provides of just, I'm just going to go and do this kind of quest and jump online with a few friends, and that kind of Borderlands, do it whatever difficulty you want, and at the end of it you'll get the loot and the guns and whatever you're looking for, and hopefully you'll find a gun that has higher stats than the one that you have now, and you're good to go. But the Gears of War comparison is it does that kind of third person, every environment or object is around your waist, so you can kind of crouch behind it, lots of cover. But it doesn't. And I actually went back and I played the original Gears of War after playing some Outriders, because I was like, this just doesn't feel as like, when you play Gears of War and you have any wall or anywhere to cover, there's a nice kind of satisfying snap of the animation between you being there and then snapping against the wall, and it feels kind of satisfying. This does not have that. It has no seamlessness to that transition. And I also realized, and I don't know if I was doing something wrong, but pretty much any time I would come out of cover to shoot at something, I wouldn't go back into cover. I would now just be standing, and I'd just be getting a hellstorm of bullets fired at me, and I'm trying to remember, okay, what is the crouch button? Why am I not staying crouched? So I would then get crouched, then get back up again to fire, and then get back into that same problem, because it wouldn't go back into a crouching position.
What?
There is a reason for that, because Outriders, right, as well as so it has all that like cover base in it, but the actual gameplay behaves a lot like Killzone 2. So, and maybe all the Killzones were the same, but I know that this was a big thing in Killzone 2 when I played it, is that one of the things that I really loved about that game is that if you stayed where you were, the enemies just kept on coming. There was never a moment where it would be like, right, I've cleared out this section, you'd move forward. To advance in Killzone, you have to keep going forward. You have to push forward as you shoot. Otherwise, you'll just stay where you are. You'll just get pinned down by the enemy. That's what Outriders is doing. So I think what it's trying to do with those mechanics is that it's trying to be a cover shooter, but yet also be like a proper, action adventure third person shooter. So it's like saying, yeah, you can go as a cover, but we really don't want you to be in cover because otherwise you're just going to be sitting here for hours shooting at the same people coming at you over and over again.
Yeah, I actually watched a review on the game where they said that actually the longer you play the game, the less you actually use any cover at all, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the case because the thing that it adds on from like a Gears of War is you can pick one of 4 different classes. There's like Pyromancer, Trickster, and the other 2 that I can't remember. And the one thing I do like about it is that the game doesn't do health packs, and it doesn't do like standing one spot and you'll just get back to full health. It makes you actively use those abilities. So I was using Pyromancer, and you'd have like 3 different types of abilities where you could kind of throw like a wall of fire or this sort of lasso made of fire, kind of like Wonder Woman's lasso.
Oh, cool.
And if you hit an enemy and started firing at them while they were, in this instance with Pyromancer, on fire, that's how you would regain health. So that was a nice little...
That's cool.
That's a cool little feature, and I thought that was like one of the few things the game was doing that was like, okay, it provides a little bit of strategy in terms of, you're not always just firing for the sake of firing. Sometimes you want to maybe stand off for a bit, set one of them on fire, take off a few shots, get your health back, then kind of get back into the thick of things. So that was cool. The biggest issue with the game, though, is that the writing and the narrative and the overall story has all of the nuance and tact of a early 2000s new metal album. And not even you've got your Limp Bizkits up here somewhere, kinda. I'm talking like Puddle of Mud or Theory of the Dead Man. I'm talking
no, not
really,
sort
really
of
bad.
spine shank territory.
Oh yeah.
Spine Shank.
They were great. I used to listen to Spine Shank.
Shinedown or
Lyrics weren't very good, but-
Mudvayne, right? Like
Mudvayne. Oh.
every other word is and it's there's a time and a place and there's a way that can be done. You think of your Tarantino films. There's a way that can be done that has a bit of charm to it.
Like if there's a button for it on 50 Cent Blood and Sand.
Oh, I love that game. So
There we go.
I know.
But it's clearly this is like their way of trying to amplify edginess and attitude, and it's just completely it makes Gears of War looks like Shakespeare theatre. It's that bad.
Oh dear.
I always find with stuff like profanity, violence, those kinds of things. I always find that those are really useful tools in a storyteller's tool set, right? Like they are, they can be incredibly evocative. So I mean, I've not seen it, but my understanding is in something like The Wire. The use of that kind of language is meant to explain a kind of street culture, a kind of criminal culture.
Well, there's famously there's a whole scene in the first season of The Wire where the 2 main detectives say nothing to each other but one swear word for about 5 or 6 minute scene. And it's the most incredible piece of writing possibly in the whole of the 5 seasons of The Wire because it just does everything. A bit like the start to 4 Weddings and a Funeral.
What a double bill.
So I mean, like they can be incredible, and also when you've got incredible actors that are able to use that script and actually put in real intonation into those words, then that stuff can really work out. But I completely agree with you. Like I'm a great believer in the kind of like graph of games trying to that take your emotions and kind of plot them onto a kind of graph, right? Like the idea of like in Uncharted, for example, you need those slower moments because that makes the high intensity moments that much more intense.
Yeah.
When it's so it's jokey and upbeat and so much so that when you have the sensitive moments, they really hit home. When you've got that kind of like it's all the same like violence, like I know on the Steam store page for Outriders, it's described as like brutal and bloody combat, and it's like that's fine. It's just that like I don't know about you, but when I play Mortal Kombat, I'm just not bothered by it anymore. Like I see it and I'm like, yeah, violence. Like this is the one trick you have, and you don't go you never mix things up, like because it's not mixed up, it doesn't feel as impactful. So that when you end up with this kind of like slightly poor writing that just kind of uses sort of like profanity as a kind of crutch for emotion, it just feels kind of weak.
And on top of that as well, the entire script is laced in that just very lazy sarcasm as a replacement for humor or just, again,
right.
attitude. And you know, sarcasm is the lowest form of wit, and it is the laziest style of writing. And every just kind of bad trope in writing and dialogue is found in here. So you take all of the swearing and all of that, and you take this just protagonist who is so kind of just doesn't care, and he's too cool for school, you know. And it's been interesting because I'm rewatching Cowboy Bebop at the moment, and Spike Spiegel is a very famous character that is also kind of very too cool for school. But for a start, that kind of plays into his entire backstory because he's already died once, and so, you know, he's just living this life from moment to moment. But he has those moments where he comes across as likable and human, and he's not saying every other word, which is kind of crucial. Right. But literally within, 5 minutes of this game, the main protagonist is incredibly unlikable. Everyone around you is incredibly unlikable. And it works in something like Far Cry 3, because most of those people die or are kidnapped, so that's good. But here, the main protagonist is you, and he's the most unlikable, and you're the one playing as him. And just after 4 hours and kind of average gameplay experience and servers not working, I was like, I think I've had my fill of this. But it's astonishing that game, you have to be connected to the servers, even as a single-player experience. That, I think, annoys me more than anything else, that I can't even play this by myself offline. And yeah, again, after I waited for about half an hour for the servers to load, I get it, like, games at launch, if they are an online game, it's going to happen. I get that. And, I'm not the kind of person that's going to go online to the community manager of that game and swear expletives like it's their fault. I know that because that's my job, so I definitely am not going to do it to anyone else. But after 2 weeks and that's still happening, I don't know.
Yeah, but if you went to a cinema and paid your money and you got there and they were like, oh, still building the projector, come back in 2 weeks, you'd be like, I feel like we give the games industry so much pass for so much stuff, and it's just...
Well, I guess I was less angry because I downloaded it on Game Pass, I guess.
So I've been playing Call of Cthulhu, which is a thick book. So it is a tabletop role-playing game. So this is the 7th edition. Yeah, 7th edition. I believe it was made in the early 80s, late 70s maybe, and it was made by, fun fact, a guy called Sandy Peterson, who, of course, any Doom fans?
I've played Doom. I'm aware of Doom.
Played it.
He was a level designer on. He was a level designer on Doom. So he made Call of Cthulhu, and we've played and we've talked about basic fantasy role-playing game before. It is from that era, where the original is from that era, where like the game is not mucking around. Like it does not want you to get into combat, right? So the game is, and that's the case in basic fantasy. That's certainly the case in Call of Cthulhu, and the reason that they use that it's difficult, the reason that death is just around the corner at all times, is in basic fantasy, it's because you're going into dungeons and you're fighting monsters. Like that should be frightening and challenging. In Call of Cthulhu, you're going up against cosmic horror, things that just gods that don't even know you exist, let alone care about whether or not you survive. Now, the thing is, I've not been playing this with anybody else. I've been playing Alone Against the Dark, which is a solo role-playing game adventure. So this is. So do you remember game books? I don't know. Well, stuff like Sorcery, for example. The Sorcery apps are essentially game books. Choose your own adventures, all that kind of stuff. Basically, you're on entry 1. and it goes, "You are in a dungeon. There is a skeleton. Do you go left or right? If you choose left, go to entry 2. If you choose right, go to entry 12." And you move around the narrative in that way. And this uses 7th edition, so you need this book and this thing here. So this totals about...
For the listeners at home, Pete's holding up a big, large blue book in his left hand and a smaller black book in his right.
And this represents about 60 quid's worth of books.
Is this like Choose Your Own Adventure DLC?
Right, yeah. So the actual Call of Cthulhu itself is meant to be a tabletop role-playing game itself. Like, you can just play this as a group, and I'm sure we'll run it at some point because it's really good. And it's deadly. Super deadly. Alone Against the Dark is also super, super deadly, to the point that I've played one of these adventures before called Alone Against the Flames. And that's a really good intro experience of like a really great Lovecraftian story about going into a strange village, something's not quite right, and finding out what the mystery is at the heart of this little population. And Alone Against the Dark is an incredibly experimental solo role-playing game in which you have to do all sorts of admin. Basically, this is the kind of game that doesn't exist anymore, or they don't really make games like this anymore all that much because they've been taken over by video games. Because really, you want a video game to do all of the admin. In a role playing game, so a CRPG like Baldur's Gate or a Witcher or something like that, the game is keeping track of absolutely everything for you: the time, what the environment looks like, the enemies, how combat works, the damage you do, everything. In this, not only are you using this big old rulebook to figure out how combat works against enemies and all that kind of stuff, because you are using the proper rules from the 7th edition Keeper rulebook. You're also tracking things like, what time is it? How many hours have you spent exploring the world? And that's not just a case of every turn is an hour. Every turn has a dynamic amount of hours based on the kinds of actions that you might take. So if you do a certain kind of action, it will be 1 hour. But if you if you walk, for example, to a location, it takes 2 hours. If you take a taxi, it takes 1. If you have a conversation with somebody, you need to remember that's going to take an extra hour. And it never actually says in the entry in the book. It's just right at the beginning. It says, remember, you need to keep this in mind. You also need to keep in mind things like you have to sleep for at least 8 hours every 24 hours. And you have to have at least 2 meals and spend X amount of time doing those things. There are also really quite interesting...
For the listeners at home, Pete's now flicking through the smaller black book in both of his hands to find a page that he should have marked earlier.
This is a pyramid puzzle. So to describe it, it is little triangles, and you're meant to photocopy them or print them out, and you cut those out, and then you put them onto this pyramid grid. And there is a puzzle within the actual story and adventure itself, and you need to figure that out. Use that to essentially make a map throughout the actual pyramid that you might go and investigate. You don't have to. It's a really quite an open world game. You may never go to the pyramid, and you can still get the quote unquote good ending. And there are multiple endings as well. There are 4 characters that you can play as. You never have to roll your own. You can if you want to, but each one of the characters has different skill sets that feels really thematic and really different. And each one of them is connected to the last one that you played as. So you can die in this game really easily. And you then take up the next adventure, and they happen to know the person who died. So you go on and you add to that story.
How does it work in terms of things like sight creep, like that thing that happens in like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, where you go and investigate location 33, it doesn't have what you want, but you just take a quick glance across at 37, and it's just like, haha, I've solved it, and then you go, right, I'm going to go and look at 37
to find out.
As in life.
Brilliantly, because it's all kind of plain text stuff, it actually doesn't. It isn't that bad. It seems to be done really well. Or maybe the numbers are so far apart that if you see an entry next to it, it's very unlikely it's anything to do with what you're currently doing. The length of this thing, this took me 7 hours. I played this game book for 7 hours, and I got 2 of the endings. I think there might be another one. I got one of the endings without cheating. I'm gloriously happy to say. I had to cheat to find the other ones because it handles difficulty in a really great way, in that the combat is absolutely lethal. There is a bit where you are confronted by one bad guy who's just a regular mook, and they might just kill you. Like, the combat is like super, super swingy. And that's great because you're always feeling this tension of there's always a timer. It definitely works with Lovecraft's exotic foreign lands as well. Like, it definitely has a lot of that Lovecraftian the other, which, and it never delves into the other Lovecraftian the other, but that one. But it never dives into that. But it does always feel like an adventure in the same way that Indiana Jones is the other. So when, like, they're in what's an Indiana Jones film? The one where
Don't help him.
When not Hitler melts.
Maybe the one where he looks at the chest and then
Raiders
he
of the
melts.
Lost Ark.
Yeah,
but there's also one where someone drinks a drink and he melts.
There's also one with a crystal skull, but we don't talk about that one.
Either way, that the idea that going to an exotic location is all really strange and, like, how different. So there is always this time element that is always, you always feel like the time is kind of like chasing up to you. You never feel like you can just get into a fight like that. You always think, I need to figure out how to not do this. When things are very clearly about to go bad for you, there is always this sense of, this is bad.
But where's the flexibility? If all you're doing is choosing go left or go right, it's not like an RPG where you can be
But Sam, it is.
But it is.
So I should have made a mark for this one. There's a what's called a handout, and Call of Cthulhu has a lot of handouts generally, and it has a load of location tables. So you will start in one location, and then it will say, cool, you can go to any Arkham location, and then it will provide you a bunch of entries. Do you want to go to the hospital? That's 585, and then you figure out where you go from there. You might go to Arkham First National Bank. By the way, if you're going to play this, definitely go to Arkham First National Bank. Made that mistake on the first time. And that's go to entry 3. And from there, there'll be vignettes of stories where you can either, if you're in the university, you can go and talk to different people and there'll be different choices. So there's a lot of flexibility here of choosing between essentially different nodes that you kind of explore. It's not simply a case of, do you want to do this or do you want to do that? You live, you die.
But what I mean is, like, did you ever find yourself going down a pathway that you wouldn't ever be able to get out of? Because if you're just playing the straight RPG, there's always like, oh my god, we're going in a wrong direction here. We're all going to decide to take this action and go out. Whereas a choose your own adventure, sometimes you get yourself down a path where it doesn't matter where you go, it's going to end up.
Were you the bandido?
So yeah, right. So quite often you can double back. Quite often. The one area where I want to talk about the where it gets difficulty wrong is there are very occasionally moments where you can't know that you're going in the wrong direction. The game is almost, when you have like invisible walls in video games, where like the game will push you back or be like, you are leaving the area, and like,
please return to the mission area.
Well, Alone Against the Dark, the way that Alone Against the Dark does that is it just tries to kill you as quickly as possible, and because of that, my stupid primitive brain just goes, there's got to be something good at the end of this, then, hasn't there? And it turns out you can beat those sections. It's just generally the victory at the end is, oh, this was a dead end, and that kind of difficulty is rubbish because the combat is so swingy, as in like you will it's very easy to just murk someone, but because of that, it's also very easy to get murked yourself. The difficulty in that is you start just burning through investigators. You just absolutely start smashing through. So I managed to basically get through to an ending, a correct ending that wasn't just death, using just 2 investigators. But if I'd gone down a different path, which I did later to explore different bits of the book, I would have gone through like 12 without cheating. Like, and each investigator, you need to, okay, cool, create the new character sheet, put the new stuff in, go and buy all the equipment, go through the rest of this part of the adventure. It's a fascinating book. It's an absolutely brilliant example of a solo role-playing experience that does feel very open world. It just screws up the difficulty bit in certain little ways. It's a bit of a shame.
Well, that was episode 126 of Staying In with Sam Turner, Peter Willington, special guest Mark Robinson, and myself, Chris Darby. That was a great show. I went on quite a journey in that show, I think, as you've probably heard. And I've had some thinking time to consider actually what I feel would be a better alternative to bread. And I don't know if you've got any ideas in terms of what this would be. And I've been racking my brains about it. And I still keep coming back to egg, just because it's so versatile. Anyway, I'll mull that over continuously. It was lovely to have Mark back on the show. We've not had Mark here, I think, since episode 85, when he was there talking about Baba Is You, which is an excellent game. So if you really like the sound of Mark's voice, listen back to episode 85, where he waxes lyrical about that game. Or alternatively, you can turn your back on us entirely and listen to his incredible video gaming podcast, Link to the Cast. And that is at Link to the Cast. And you can find that on most podcasting platforms as well. I highly recommend you check it out. If you are not going to turn your back completely and you want to stick with us, great. Well, we've got a whole back catalogue. Some would say we've got another 125 episodes of content to listen to if this is your first time listening to us, really, where we cover a range of different stuff, as evidenced in this podcast, from the board games, the video games, television series, films, anything geeky. StayingInPodcast.com is really the central hub which will take you to everything. That includes our social media stuff, on our Instagram, which is doing fantastically. Sam's been publishing even more unboxing videos there. To our Board Game Geek page, where every board game we cover, we have our kind of like our list of games covered there if board games are more of your jam. And likewise for video games, our Steam curation page covers the digital types of games that we play. And if you want to just drop us a line, if you've got a better alternative to egg as a replacement to bread, email us at stayinginpod@gmail.com, or just hit us up on Twitter at stayinginpod, basically as you covered for that, and also for our Facebook pages as well. But yeah, thanks for listening. Until next time, take care.